I am not asking you again. You are jeopardizing this flight. Comply now.
You should be more concerned with the jet on our wing.
If there is anyone on this aircraft with military flight experience, identify yourself immediately. The captain's voice did not sound like a captain anymore. It cracked through the dark cabin like a warning shot. No music, no laughter, no soft clinking of plastic cups, just the low roar of the engines and the sudden silence of 195 people realizing that something was wrong at 37,000 feet. In seat 8A, Ethan Brooks opened his eyes. For 3 seconds, he did not move. He sat there in a faded grey hoodie, jeans wrinkled from travel, one hand still resting near the unopened bag of pretzels on his tray table. To the man beside him, he looked like any other tired father flying home after too many meetings and not enough sleep. To the woman across the aisle, he looked harmless, ordinary, forgettable. But Ethan knew that tone. He had heard men use that voice over desert airspace, over black ocean, over burning fuel and broken instruments. It was the voice of a person trying not to let fear leak through the radio. The cabin lights were dimmed for the overnight flight from New York to London. Blue shadows lay across sleeping faces. A paperback slipped from an elderly man's lap. A young mother tightened her arm around her little boy. Somewhere behind row 12, someone whispered, "What did he just say?" Then the captain came on again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mark Reynolds. We are experiencing a technical situation that requires immediate assistance. If there are any former military pilots on board, especially fighter pilots with experience in manual flight under extreme conditions, please contact a flight attendant now." This time no one misunderstood. A ripple of fear moved through the aircraft. Seatbelts clicked. Heads turned. Phones lit up like tall, frightened candles in the dark. A woman in a navy cardigan pressed her hand to her mouth. A businessman who had been asleep with his tie loosened, sat upright so fast his reading glasses fell into his lap. At the front of the cabin, Claire Bennett, the lead flight attendant, stepped into the aisle. She was 44, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, and a face trained by years of turbulence, delays, angry passengers, and emergencies that were never supposed to become emergencies. But her fingers were white around the interphone. "Please remain seated," she said. Her voice was calm. Her eyes were not. Ethan watched her scan the cabin row by row. He felt his throat tighten. Not from fear of dying. That came later. What hit him first was the image of Lily, 8 years old, curled beneath a lavender blanket in their small house in Seattle. One front tooth missing. Braids spread across her pillow. Her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Mrs. Helen Parker, the retired school teacher next door, asleep in the guest room, because Ethan had promised this would only be a quick work trip. Lily believed him. She always believed him. Daddy goes away. Daddy comes back. That was the entire architecture of her world. Ethan closed his eyes for half a breath, and the cabin vanished. He was back in a cockpit, F-16, fighting Falcon. Night sky. Cold hands. Warning lights flashing red across the glass. His call sign snapping through the radio. "Hawk, you're losing pressure. Hawk, pull up. Hawk, do you copy?" Then another voice cut through the memory. Smaller, softer, more dangerous than any alarm. "Daddy, are you coming home?" Ethan's hand curled around the armrest. 4 years ago, he had knelt in front of Lily in their living room and made the only promise that mattered. No more combat, No more deployments. No more nights when his little girl had to stare at the front door and wonder whether the man who loved her most was still alive. "I'm coming home," he had told her. "And I'm staying." Now the aircraft dipped. Not much. Just enough. A glass rolled off a tray table and shattered near the aisle. A man cursed. The little boy started crying. Claire grabbed the back of a seat to steady herself, and for one brief second, her professional mask slipped. Ethan saw it clearly. She was scared. Not annoyed. Not inconvenienced. Scared. And that changed everything. The young man beside Ethan pulled off his headphones. "Man, is this plane going down?" Ethan did not answer. He looked toward the front. Claire had reached row 5, then row 6, then row 7. Her eyes searched faces, pleading without saying the words. "Please let someone be here. Please let someone know what to do." When she reached row 8, she looked straight at Ethan and moved on, because she saw what everyone saw. A tired black man in a hoodie. No uniform. No medals. No polished shoes. No reason to believe he had ever touched anything more dangerous than a laptop. Ethan felt something old and cold rise in his chest. Not anger. Recognition. The world had always been quick to decide what kind of man he was before he opened his mouth. But tonight, their judgment did not matter. Only the plane did. Only Lily did. Only the lives suspended in the dark above the Atlantic. Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded louder than it should have. Claire turned. Passengers near him froze. Ethan stood slowly in the aisle, his shoulders straightening as if an invisible uniform had settled over him. "I was a fighter pilot," he said. Claire stared at him. The engines roared beneath their feet. Ethan's voice stayed low. Steady. Certain. F-16s. 13 years. Claire Bennett did not move for half a second. Her eyes locked on Ethan Brooks, as if she were trying to decide whether he was a miracle or another problem falling into her lap at the worst possible moment. The cabin watched with her. 195 lives, strapped into leather seats and cheap fear, all looking at the tired man in row 8, who had just claimed he could do what no one else could. "You were a fighter pilot?" Claire asked. Her voice stayed professional, but something hard had entered it. Not cruelty. Calculation. Ethan nodded once. United States Air Force. F-16s. 13 years. A man in row 7 turned in his seat, silver hair mussed from sleep, his mouth half open. "You gotta be kidding me," he whispered. The young man beside Ethan stared at him, like he had just watched a ghost climb out of an ordinary body. "Dude," he breathed. "You serious?" Ethan did not look at him. Claire stepped closer. "Do you have identification?" "No." The word hit the aisle like a dropped tool. Claire's face tightened. "No military ID? No credentials? Nothing?" "I left the service 4 years ago. I don't carry it anymore." A woman across the aisle made a small sound of disbelief. "Then how do we know he's not making it up?" That question traveled. It moved from face to face, seat to seat, until the cabin became a courtroom, and Ethan became the accused. Claire lowered her voice, but everyone nearby still heard her. "Sir, I need you to understand exactly where we are. If you are confused, exaggerating, or trying to help in a way that makes things worse, people could die." "I understand." "No," Claire said, sharper now. Her hand trembled once, then clenched at her side. I need to know that you understand. There are children on this aircraft, elderly passengers, families, people who trusted us to get them home. I cannot take a stranger into a cockpit because he says the right words. Ethan held her gaze. He could feel the old humiliation trying to rise. The familiar weight of being doubted before, being heard. In another life, in another room, maybe he would have swallowed it and sat down. He had done that before. In airports, hotels, boardrooms, places where people looked at his skin, his clothes, his silence, and built a story around him that had nothing to do with the truth. But the plane shuddered again. A hard, sideways tremor. Overhead, bins rattled. Someone screamed near the back. The little boy began sobbing louder, begging his mother to make it stop. Ethan's jaw set. "Ma'am," he said, controlled and low, "you don't have time to trust me slowly." Claire flinched, as if the truth had touched a nerve. Before she could answer, a voice rose from behind Ethan. "Ask him something real." An older man pushed himself up from seat 9C. He was broad through the shoulders, with weathered hands and a face carved by discipline. His name was Frank Miller, though no one in that cabin knew it yet. He wore a brown jacket over a plaid shirt, the kind of outfit that made him look like a retired contractor on his way to visit grandchildren. But his stance betrayed him. Straight back, balanced feet, eyes that did not panic. Claire turned to him. "Sir, please sit down." "I spent 22 years in the army," Frank said. "Joint operations, air support. I've been around fighter pilots. If he's lying, I'll know." Ethan looked at Frank. Frank looked back with no softness, no pity, only measurement. "What did you fly?" Frank asked. "F-16. Fighting Falcon. Variant? Mostly Block 50. Some training hours on Block 42. Frank's eyes narrowed. "Base? Hill Air Force Base. 388th Fighter Wing." A few passengers blinked, as if the words themselves had weight. Frank stepped into the aisle. "Call sign?" Ethan hesitated. Not because he did not remember, because that name belonged to another life. "Hawk," he said. Frank heard something in the answer. A past. A wound. A man who had not used that name in years. "How many hours?" "Just over 2,100. "Combat?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Enough." Frank studied him for another beat, then fired the question like a weapon. "Hydraulic failure. Dual system degradation. You're losing control authority. Talk me through your first moves." The cabin went still. Even Claire stopped breathing. Ethan answered without pause. "Stabilize attitude first. No aggressive inputs. Confirm pressure loss. Check flight control response. Engage emergency power where available. Reduce workload. Coordinate with the other pilot. Keep speed above stall margin. If control surfaces degrade further, use trim, thrust management, and shallow corrections. Get the aircraft on the ground before the system quits completely." Frank did not blink. "Manual reversion? Only if the aircraft gives you no better option. It's ugly, heavy, and unforgiving. You don't muscle it. You anticipate it." Frank's mouth tightened. Not quite a smile. Recognition. He turned to Claire. "He's real." Claire swallowed. For the first time, her authority looked less like command and more like burden. She glanced toward the cockpit door, then back at Ethan. Her mind ran through regulations, liability, crew protocol, the terrible math of risk. A stranger without ID, a failing aircraft, a captain desperate enough to ask the cabin for help. Then the interphone in her hand buzzed. She lifted it. "This is Claire." Her face changed as she listened. Whatever she heard drained the last color from her cheeks. "Yes, Captain," she said. "I found someone." She lowered the phone slowly. The cabin seemed to lean toward her. Claire looked at Ethan, and the doubt in her eyes did not disappear. It became something more dangerous. Desperation. "Come with me," she said. Ethan nodded. As he stepped into the aisle, the young mother with the crying boy reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Her fingers were cold. "Please," she whispered. "I have to get him home." Ethan looked down at the boy, at his wet cheeks and trembling chin, and for 1 second he saw Lily again. Small, trusting, waiting. "I'll try," Ethan said. The mother's eyes filled because she understood what he had not promised. Claire turned toward the front of the aircraft and began walking fast. Ethan followed. Every row watched him pass. Some faces held hope, some suspicion, some shame for having doubted him before they even knew his name. At the cockpit door, Claire stopped and faced him. Her voice dropped to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "If you are not who you say you are, I will never forgive myself." Ethan looked past her at the locked door, at the glow of instruments bleeding through the small seam, at the future waiting on the other side. "I am who I say I am," he said. Claire knocked twice, keyed the code, and spoke into the panel. "It's Claire. I'm bringing him in." The lock clicked. The door opened, and the sound that came from inside was not the sound of a controlled cockpit. It was the sound of a plane beginning to lose the fight. The cockpit smelled like set, overheated electronics, and fear. Ethan Brooks stepped inside, and the past hit him so hard he almost stopped breathing. Not because the cockpit looked like an F-16. It did not. This was a commercial aircraft, wide, heavy, built to carry families and business travelers across an ocean. But panic had the same smell everywhere. Metal. Heat. Human breath held too long. Captain Mark Reynolds sat in the left seat, slumped against the harness, his grey hair damp against his forehead. His left hand hung useless near the side console. His mouth drooped slightly on one side. His eyes were open, but unfocused, trapped behind a body that had betrayed him. A woman in a cream sweater knelt beside him, one hand pressed to his wrist, the other holding a small medical kit open on the floor. "I'm Dr. Allison Carter," she said quickly, without looking up. "He's had a stroke. Maybe mild, maybe worse. He can hear us, but he can't fly." Captain Reynolds tried to speak. Only a broken sound came out. Ethan looked at him. In that sound, he heard shame, rage, terror. A captain losing command in front of strangers. "You did the right thing calling for help," Ethan said. Reynolds' eyes shifted toward him, wet, furious, grateful. In the right seat, First Officer Ryan Cooper gripped the yoke with both hands. He was 31, pale, clean-shaven, with the stunned expression of a man who had trained for emergencies but had never felt one wrap its hands around his throat. Sweat darkened the collar of his white shirt. His headset sat crooked over one ear. "Who are you?" Ryan asked. Ethan Brooks, former Air Force, F-16s. Ryan gave one sharp, disbelieving laugh. Not humor. Shock. Great. A fighter pilot. That's what we've got. Claire stiffened behind Ethan. He was verified by a former army officer in the cabin. Ryan did not turn around. His eyes stayed nailed to the instruments. Verified how? With a handshake. The aircraft dipped again, heavier this time. Ryan pulled back too hard. Easy, Ethan snapped. Ryan froze. The nose lifted. The airspeed tape trembled. Ethan stepped closer, voice low and immediate. Do not fight her. You fight her, she'll take more from you. Ryan swallowed and loosened his grip by a fraction. The jet settled, still shaking, but no longer climbing. Ethan scanned the panels. Lights, warnings, numbers changing too fast, hydraulic pressure dropping, flight control response lagging, autopilot disconnected. Trim fighting them. A machine the size of a building, beginning to feel less like an aircraft and more like an animal in pain. What failed? Ethan asked. Ryan's words came fast. Hydraulic System 2 started dropping after the captain complained of numbness. Then System 3 fluctuated. Autopilot kicked off. Flight controls went heavy. I declared an emergency, but I'm getting degraded response on pitch and roll. We're over the Atlantic, west of Ireland. Shannon is closest with runway length and emergency response. Fuel? Enough. Souls on board? 195 passengers, 10 crew. Ethan heard Claire inhale behind him. Numbers were never just numbers in a cockpit. They were birthdays, wedding rings, unsent texts, grandchildren waiting at arrivals, a little girl in Seattle sleeping beside a stuffed rabbit. Ethan leaned over the center console. You already told Shannon? Ryan nodded. They're clearing traffic. Weather is rough. Crosswinds. Rain on approach. Of course it is, Ethan muttered. Dr. Allison glanced up at him then, sharp and worried. Can you land this plane? There it was. The question no one wanted to ask, now hanging in the tight cockpit air. Ryan's eyes flicked toward him. Claire's breath stopped. Even Captain Reynolds seemed to strain inside his broken body for the answer. Ethan looked at the instruments again. He did not lie to frightened people. Not in combat, not in fatherhood. Not now. I can help him land it, Ethan said, if the hydraulics hold long enough. Ryan's face tightened. And if they don't? Ethan met his eyes. Then we make the airplane understand we're not done with it yet. No one spoke. A warning chime pulsed. Ryan cursed under his breath. Pressure's dropping again. Ethan pointed. Start a slow descent. Nothing aggressive. 200 feet per minute first. Let's feel what she gives us. Ryan hesitated. He did not like being instructed by a man in a hoodie. Ethan could see it. Pride. Fear. Training. Chain of command. All of it crowded Ryan's face. But beneath that, something better was fighting to surface. The will to live. Ryan eased the controls forward. The aircraft responded late. Too late. Then the nose dipped. Correct, Ethan said. Small input, smaller. Wait for the response. Ryan's hand trembled. She's lagging. I know, I've never hand-flown one like this. Then don't think of the whole airplane, Ethan said. Think of the next 5 seconds. Ryan blinked. Ethan's voice sharpened. 5 seconds, attitude, speed, descent. That's your world now. Ryan nodded once. Barely. Claire stood behind them, braced against the wall, watching the transformation happen. The tired passenger from row 8 had vanished. In his place stood someone colder, clearer, terrifyingly focused. He did not ask for authority. He became it. The radio crackled. Atlantic World 482, Shannon Control. Confirm medical emergency and flight control failure. Emergency vehicles standing by. Say intentions. Ryan reached for the mic, but his fingers slipped. Ethan leaned closer. Breathe first. Ryan dragged air into his lungs. Then he keyed the mic. Shannon Control, Atlantic World 482. We have pilot incapacitation and degraded hydraulics. Request vectors for immediate approach. We may need priority straight in. A pause. Then the controller's voice came back. Calm, Irish, impossibly steady. Atlantic World 482, you are priority traffic. Turn right heading 085. Descend to flight level 240 when able. Ryan looked at Ethan. That turn was not simple anymore. Ethan watched the attitude indicator, then the trembling pressure gauge. Slow right turn, he said. 2 degrees at a time. Do not chase it. Ryan began the turn. The aircraft resisted, then rolled too far. Left correction, Ethan said. Ryan corrected too hard. Less. The cockpit tilted. Claire grabbed the jump seat. Dr. Allison shielded Captain Reynolds' head with one hand. Ryan, Ethan said, voice suddenly quiet. Somehow, that quiet cut deeper than shouting. Ryan stopped overcorrecting. The aircraft steadied. For one fragile second, everyone inside that cockpit believed again. Then, Hydraulic System 3 flashed red. Ryan stared at it. Oh God, he whispered. Ethan looked at the warning light, then at the dark Atlantic ahead. His heart struck once against his ribs. Lily. Then Hawk took over. Claire, he said without turning. Yes? Go tell the cabin to brace for a hard landing. Her face drained. How hard? Ethan kept his eyes on the instruments. Hard enough that they need to believe you. Claire Bennett did not want to leave the cockpit. For one breath, she stood frozen behind Ethan Brooks, one hand wrapped around the jump seat strap, her eyes fixed on the red warning light pulsing across the panel. She had worked international flights for almost 20 years. She had calmed drunk passengers, held crying babies, handled medical scares, fires in coffee makers, engine shutdowns that pilots later described as routine. But this did not feel routine. This felt like a verdict moving toward them through the dark. Claire, Ethan said again. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. She turned toward him. He still had not taken a seat. He stood slightly behind First Officer Ryan Cooper, one hand braced near the center console, his eyes moving from airspeed to attitude to hydraulic pressure with the cold precision of a man reading the last page of a life-or-death contract. No panic, no performance, no wasted motion. Tell them the truth, Ethan said. Not all of it. Enough. Claire swallowed. If I say too much, they'll panic. If you say too little, they won't brace right. Ryan stared straight ahead, his hands locked on the controls. Flight level 240, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Descending slowly. She's heavy. She's really heavy. She's listening, Ethan said. Barely. Keep talking to her. Claire looked at Captain Reynolds. His face was pale, his eyes trapped in a body that could no longer serve him. Dr. Allison Carter kept one hand on his pulse, but her gaze lifted toward Claire. There was fear there too, but not weakness. A doctor's fear, the kind that knew exactly how fragile the human body was. Claire nodded once. Then she opened the cockpit door and stepped back into the cabin. The sound hit her first, not screaming, not yet. Something worse. A low human rumble. Prayer. Questions. Breathing too fast. Seatbelts clicking. Phones buzzing. A cabin full of strangers trying to decide whether to be civilized or afraid. Frank Miller stood near row 8, one hand raised as if he could hold back the panic with his palm. "Stay seated," he told a man trying to get into the aisle. "You stand up now. You're helping nobody." "I need to call my wife," the man snapped, his face red and wet. "Call her from your seat. She needs to know." Frank's eyes softened for half a second. "Then tell her you love her." Sitting down. The man stared at him, then collapsed back into his seat, shaking. Claire moved to the forward galley and picked up the handset. Her thumb hovered over the button. She could feel every training manual she had ever read breaking apart inside her. Be calm. Be clear. Do not speculate. Maintain control. But control was not the same as honesty, and right now honesty might save bones, spines, lives. She pressed the button. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Claire Bennett, your lead flight attendant." The cabin quieted with frightening speed. "We are preparing for an emergency landing at Shannon Airport in Ireland. The flight deck is handling the situation. Emergency crews will be waiting for us on the ground." A woman gasped. A child began crying again. Claire forced her voice to stay even. "I need every passenger to listen carefully. Put your seatbelt low and tight across your hips. Remove sharp objects from your lap. Secure your phones, glasses, tablets, anything loose. Place your feet flat on the floor. When we give the command, you will brace." A man in first class shouted, "Are we going to crash?" The word crashed through the cabin harder than turbulence. Claire looked at him. He was in his late 60s, silver-haired, wearing a cashmere sweater and the terrified anger of someone who had always believed money could keep disaster at a respectful distance. "We are going to land," Claire said. "That's not what I asked." "No," she said, sharper now. "But it is the answer you need." He fell silent. In row 12, a little boy sobbed into his mother's blouse. "Mum, I don't want to die." His mother, a thin woman with tired eyes and a wedding ring twisting on her finger, pressed her lips against his hair. "You listen to me, baby. You're going to squeeze my hand. That's your job. Squeeze my hand as hard as you can." Claire saw it. The lie. The love inside the lie. The sacred duty of a parent to build a wall with words, even when the world was burning behind it. For a split second, she thought of Ethan, a man in a hoodie, a stranger she had nearly dismissed with a glance. Back in the cockpit, that stranger was fighting to give this mother the right to keep her promise. The aircraft dropped suddenly. A violent, stomach-stealing fall. Screams tore loose. Coffee lifted from cups. A phone flew into the aisle and skittered beneath a seat. Claire slammed one shoulder into the galley wall and held on until the jet caught itself again. In the cockpit, Ryan Cooper's breath came in short bursts. "Too much sink," he said. "I see it," Ethan answered. "Add a breath of thrust, not a shove. A breath." Ryan advanced the throttles a fraction. The engines deepened. The nose trembled. Good. Hold that. Hydraulic 3 is almost gone. Then stop asking it for big favors. Ryan gave a broken laugh. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, Ethan said. It's supposed to keep you alive. The radio crackled. Atlantic World 482, Shannon Control. Turn left heading 070. You are cleared down to 10,000 feet. Emergency services are in position. Ryan looked at the heading, then at Ethan. That turn puts us through the crosswind. I know. She may not hold it. She doesn't have to hold it beautifully. She has to hold it enough. Ryan's eyes flickered. You always this comforting? Ethan did not smile. Only when things are bad. In the cabin, Claire moved row by row with the other attendants. Her voice hardened into command. Seatbelt tight, bag under the seat. Sir, put the laptop away now. Ma'am, your shoes need to stay on. Hold your child close. But he must have his own belt fastened. A teenager was filming with trembling hands. Frank leaned over. Put it away. I want people to know what happened. Frank looked toward the cockpit door, then back at her. If we live, tell the story. If we don't, that phone won't save you. The girl's face crumpled. She lowered it. The plane banked left. Too steep. The cabin tilted. A chorus of fear rose from every row. Claire grabbed the top of a seat as the aisle seemed to lean away beneath her feet. Inside the cockpit, Ryan fought the roll. Left is running away, he said, panic sharpening the edges of his words. Right correction. Small. It's not responding. Wait for it. It's not responding. Ryan. Wait. 1 second. 2. The aircraft answered late, groaning back toward level like a wounded giant. Ryan exhaled so hard it sounded like pain. Ethan leaned closer to the windshield. Far ahead, beneath broken clouds and sheets of rain, a faint string of runway lights appeared through the black. Shannon. A thin line of mercy. Ethan's chest tightened. Not with fear, with purpose. He spoke without looking away. Claire needs everyone braced early. Ryan glanced at him. How early? Ethan watched the runway lights flicker in the storm. Early enough that they have time to pray. Rain streaked across the windshield like silver wire. For a moment, Ethan Brooks could not see the runway at all. Only darkness. Cloud. The blurred glow of Shannon Airport somewhere ahead, appearing and disappearing as if the earth itself were unsure whether to welcome them back. First Officer Ryan Cooper leaned towards the glass, jaw tight, eyes locked forward. I've got the lights. Barely. Don't chase them, Ethan said. Fly the numbers. Ryan gave a short, humorless breath. The numbers hate us. They don't care about us. That's better. The aircraft groaned as another gust shoved against its side. The nose yawed left. Ryan corrected too sharply. The jet answered late, then too much. Easy, Ethan said. I am easy. No. You're afraid. Ryan's hands froze for half a heartbeat. Ethan did not soften it. There was no time for comfort, disguised as kindness. Fear makes you over-control. Over-control kills lift. Let the plane speak before you answer. Ryan swallowed hard. You sound like my first instructor. Was he right? I hated him. Was he right? Ryan's eyes flicked to the airspeed tape. Yeah. Then hate me later. Behind them, Dr. Allison Carter pressed a folded blanket under Captain Reynolds's head. The captain's eyes shifted toward the windshield, helpless and burning. He understood enough. That was the cruelty. He was still the captain in his mind, still responsible for every soul behind that door. But his body had abandoned the fight. Allison saw the anguish in him. She leaned close. "Captain, they're doing everything they can." His fingers twitched once. Maybe agreement. Maybe protest. Maybe prayer. In the cabin, Claire Bennett stood in the forward aisle with one hand on the interphone and the other gripping the edge of a seat back. The aircraft swayed beneath her feet. Her knees wanted to buckle. She did not let them. "Brace command is coming soon," she told the passengers. "Review your position now. Heads down when instructed. Arms over your head or against the seat in front of you. Stay low. Stay tight." A man near the front shook his head wildly. "I can't. I have a bad back. I can't bend like that." Claire crouched beside him. He was older, maybe 70, with a wedding band loose on a thin finger and eyes flooded with shame. He was not defiant. He was terrified of being weak in front of strangers. "What's your name?" Claire asked. "Walter." "Walter, you're going to do what you can. Put your feet flat. Cross your arms against the seat back. Lower your head as far as it goes. That's enough." "What if it isn't?" Claire looked at him. For once, she did not offer a polished airline answer. "Then we still do enough together." His lips trembled. He nodded. Across the aisle, Frank Miller helped a young mother tighten the belt around her boy's waist. The child clutched a toy dinosaur in one fist. His small knuckles were white. "What's his name?" Frank asked. "Caleb," the mother said. Frank bent until his weathered face was level with the boy's. "Caleb, you know what soldiers do when things get loud?" The boy shook his head. "They listen for the next order. That's all. Not the whole battle, just the next order. Can you do that?" Caleb sniffed. "I think so. That's good enough." The plane dropped again, harder this time. The cabin screamed. In the cockpit, alarms layered over each other. Ryan's voice cracked, sync rate. "I see it." "Add thrust." Ryan pushed the throttles forward. "Too much." He pulled back. "Not that much. Small corrections. Small." The runway lights grew clearer now, stretching across the rain like a narrow strip of judgment. Ethan felt the old math running through him. Weight, speed, wind, control response, sync rate, distance. Human life compressed into numbers that did not forgive. "Flaps?" Ryan asked. "Minimal. We don't know what they'll give us, and we may not like the answer." "Gear?" "On my call." Ryan nodded, lips moving silently. "Checklist fragments. Training. Fear." Ethan caught it. "Say it out loud." "What?" "Your brain is trying to hide. Make it work in the open." Ryan drew a breath. "Airspeed holding. Descent unstable but manageable. Heading correcting. We're high. Yes, we're fast. Yes. That's bad. That's survivable." Ryan looked at him. "You really believe that?" Ethan looked forward. "I believe in the next 5 seconds." The radio came alive. "Atlantic World 482. Wind 270 at 30, gusting 41. Runway 24 cleared to land. All emergency services standing by." Ryan stared. "Gusting 41? Claire heard the number through the cockpit speaker as she reached the galley. She did not understand every technical detail, but she understood the silence that followed. The crew around her understood it too. One junior attendant, pale and shaking, whispered, "Oh my God." Claire turned on her with a look so sharp it stopped the words. "Not here," Claire said. The younger attendant bit her lip and nodded. Claire lifted the handset again. Her voice filled the cabin. Stronger now, stripped of all decoration. "Brace, brace, heads down, stay down." The words detonated. Passengers folded forward, hands covered heads. Parents curled around children. Strangers reached for strangers without asking names. Walter pressed his arms against the seat in front of him and closed his eyes. Frank lowered his head, one hand still gripping the back of Caleb's seat like an anchor. In the cockpit, Ethan spoke. "Gear down." Ryan lowered the lever. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then a heavy mechanical thud rolled beneath them. 3 green lights. Ryan exhaled, gear down. "Now we bring her home." The aircraft crossed through rain, wind hammering its side, runway rushing up too fast and not fast enough. Ryan fought the urge to pull. Ethan saw it in his shoulder, in the tightening of his wrist. "Don't flare early," Ethan said. "We're sinking." "Not yet." "We're sinking." "Not yet." The ground rose. Ryan's breath stopped. Ethan's voice cut through everything. "Now! Hold! Hold! Hold!" The wheels struck the runway with a brutal metallic scream. The aircraft bounced. The nose lifted. Ryan panicked and pulled. "Nos," Ethan snapped. "Let her settle." The second impact slammed through the jet like a hammer through bone. In the cabin, bodies jolted forward against belts. Overhead bins burst open. Someone cried out. Caleb's toy dinosaur flew into the aisle. The plane was on the ground, but it was not stopped. Ryan fought the center line as the jet skidded through sheets of water. Fire trucks raced alongside them, red lights flashing through the storm. "Brakes are weak," Ryan shouted. "Reverse what you've got. Keep her straight. She's pulling left, right rudder. Gentle. Don't break the nose." The runway blurred. The end lights seemed too close. Ethan's hand gripped the back of Ryan's seat. For the first time, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Come on, girl. Stay with us." The aircraft shuddered, screamed, slowed. Then with one final violent lurch, it stopped. For 3 seconds, no one believed they were alive. The aircraft sat trembling on the rain-soaked runway, engines groaning down, brakes smoking somewhere beneath them, red emergency lights spinning across the windows like the pulse of another world. Inside the cabin, heads stayed down. Hands stayed locked over skulls. Parents kept their bodies folded over children. Strangers remained frozen against strangers. Then one sound broke through. A baby cried. Not a scream of terror. Not panic. Just a living, furious, beautiful cry. Claire Bennett lifted her head first. Her cheek was pressed against the jump seat harness, her shoulder aching from the impact. She blinked once, twice, then looked down the aisle. "Stay down," she shouted, her voice raw. "Everyone stay down until instructed." But the cabin was already changing. Fear was turning into disbelief. Disbelief into sound. A woman began sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Walter, the older man with the bad back, lifted his head slowly, and touched his own chest as if checking whether his heart had followed him back to earth. Frank Miller looked over the seat in front of him. "Caleb," he said. The little boy raised his face from his mother's lap, eyes huge, cheeks wet. "Did we land?" Frank let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh and almost like pain. "Yeah, buddy. We landed." Caleb looked at the aisle. "My dinosaur." His mother broke. She pulled him against her and cried into his hair, one hand searching blindly until Frank reached down, picked up the plastic dinosaur from beneath a seat, and placed it in the boy's hand. "There," Frank said. "Soldier made it too." In the cockpit, Ryan Cooper still gripped the yoke. His knuckles were white. His eyes were fixed on the runway ahead. He did not blink. The aircraft had stopped, but his body had not received the message. He was still falling, still correcting, still waiting for the next warning light to decide whether he deserved to live. Ethan Brooks placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Ryan." No response. "Ryan. Let go." The young first officer's jaw trembled. His fingers slowly opened, one by one, as if releasing the controls hurt. "We're stopped," Ethan said. Ryan swallowed. "We're stopped. That's right." Ryan turned toward him then. His face collapsed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just a sudden breaking around the eyes, the kind men hide until there is no strength left to hide with. "I thought I killed them," he whispered. Ethan held his gaze. "You didn't. I bounced it. You brought it back. I almost lost the center line. You held it." Ryan shook his head. "You held me." For once, Ethan had no answer ready. Behind them, Dr. Allison Carter leaned over Captain Reynolds. "Captain, we're on the ground. We made it." Captain Reynolds stared toward the windshield. A tear slipped from the corner of one eye and disappeared into his grey temple. His mouth moved. No sound came, but Ethan understood the shape of it. "Thank you." Ethan nodded once. The radio crackled, alive with urgency. "Atlantic World, 482, Shannon, emergency response. Confirm status. Do you require evacuation?" Ryan reached for the mic, but his hand shook too hard. Ethan took it gently and handed it back. "Your aircraft," he said. Ryan looked at him, startled. Ethan repeated it. "Your aircraft." Something steadied in Ryan's face. He keyed the mic. "Shannon emergency, Atlantic World 482. Aircraft stopped on runway. "We have pilot incapacitation, possible passenger injuries, smoke from brakes. Request immediate medical and fire inspection. Stand by for evacuation decision." His voice trembled, but it held. That mattered. Claire entered the cockpit a moment later, hair loosened from her bun, one sleeve torn at the cuff, eyes shining with shock she had not yet allowed herself to feel. "Cabin is conscious," she said. "Some minor injuries." Panic. Overhead bins opened in the rear. "We need medical teams on board." Ryan nodded, still breathing hard. Claire looked at Ethan. For the first time since she had met him, she did not scan him for proof. She did not weigh him against suspicion. She simply looked at him like a human being, seeing another human being clearly after nearly losing the chance. "You did it," she said. Ethan shook his head. Ryan flew the airplane. Ryan gave a broken laugh. Don't do that. I'm serious. So am I. The cockpit fell quiet, except for the rain ticking against the windshield and the distant wail of emergency vehicles closing in. Then Claire's radio erupted. Forward cabin to lead. Passengers asking if they can call family. Some are standing. Claire's face hardened back into command. Tell them seated. Belts on. Phones stay put until we clear evacuation risk. She turned to leave, then stopped. Ethan. He looked at her. Her lips parted, but the words took effort. Not because they were complicated, because they required humility. I was wrong to doubt you. Ethan's expression did not change much, but something tired moved behind his eyes. You weren't wrong to protect the flight. No, Claire said quietly. I was wrong in how quickly I decided what I thought I was looking at. That landed between them heavier than the landing itself. Ethan looked past her toward the cabin door, toward the people he had not met, toward the lives still shaking in their seats. We all made it, he said. Let that be enough for right now. But Claire knew it would not be enough. Not for the mother who had begged him to save her son. Not for the passengers who had watched a man in a hoodie walk into the cockpit and become the difference between obituary and sunrise. Not for Ryan Cooper, whose career and soul would forever be divided into before Ethan Brooks and after Ethan Brooks, and not for Ethan. Because as the emergency crews surrounded the aircraft and white foam trucks rolled through the rain, Ethan reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out his phone. No signal yet. He stared at the dark screen anyway. Claire saw his thumb hover over one name. Lily. The man who had just helped save nearly 200 people looked suddenly smaller, not weak, not ordinary, just human. A father desperate to hear his little girl breathe on the other end of a line. Outside, a firefighter's flashlight swept across the cockpit glass. Inside, Ethan closed his eyes, not in victory, in gratitude. The order to evacuate came 9 minutes after the landing. 9 minutes did not sound long to the people who would later read about it online. 9 minutes sounded clean, measurable, almost harmless. But inside Atlantic World 482, 9 minutes was an entire lifetime lived under the smell of hot brakes, damp clothing, and fear that had not yet left the body. Claire Bennett stood at the forward door, listening to the crew chief outside through the headset. Rain hammered the fuselage. Red and blue emergency lights flashed across her face in violent bursts. Forward stairs are not safe, the voice said through static. Use slides, left side only. Fire team confirms no active flame, but we want passengers off now. Claire closed her eyes for one small breath. Then she opened them and became command again. Evacuate. Evacuate. Leave everything. The cabin erupted, not into chaos, into desperate motion. Seatbelts snapped open. People reached for bags out of instinct. Claire's voice cut through them like steel. Leave it. Bags stay. Move now. A man in business class grabbed his leather briefcase from beneath the seat. Frank Miller seized his wrist before Claire could reach him. You take that bag, you slow down somebody's grandmother, Frank said. The man stared at him, offended even now. My passport is in there. Frank's grip tightened. Then be alive to replace it. The man let go. At row 12, Caleb clung to his mother's hand, his plastic dinosaur pressed against his chest. His eyes were still wet, but he did not cry anymore. He watched Frank as if the older man had become part of the emergency instructions. "Next order, right?" Caleb whispered. Frank nodded. "Next order." Claire pointed toward the door. "Go. Sit and slide. Arms crossed. Move away from the aircraft at the bottom." One by one, passengers disappeared into the rain. Screams came from outside, but they were not the same screams as before. These were shock screams. Cold air. Wet ground. Survival beginning to feel real. In the cockpit, Ethan Brooks helped Dr. Allison Carter secure Captain Reynolds for removal. The captain's face twisted with frustration as paramedics climbed aboard with a medical board. "Easy," Allison said. "You're not walking out of here, Captain." Reynolds tried to protest. His right hand moved weakly against the harness. Ethan leaned closer. "You got your passengers down. Now let them carry you." The captain's eyes found him. There was pride there. Broken, bruised pride. A man who had spent his life in control being forced to surrender in front of the crew he had sworn to lead. Ethan understood that kind of wound. "I know," Ethan said quietly. "But living with it is better than dying with your hand on the yoke." Reynolds' eyes closed. The fight left his shoulders. Ryan Cooper stood by the cockpit door, headset hanging around his neck. He looked younger now, almost boyish, stripped of rank by what he had survived. When Ethan stepped toward the cabin, Ryan caught his sleeve. "Don't disappear," Ryan said. Ethan looked at him. "I mean it," Ryan added. "There will be reports, investigations, questions. They need to know what you did." Ethan's mouth tightened. "They need to know what failed. They also need to know who kept this from becoming a memorial flight." The words landed hard. Ethan pulled his sleeve free, not angrily, but carefully. "Get your passengers out first, officer." Ryan nodded, but his eyes stayed on Ethan with a kind of fierce gratitude that made Ethan uncomfortable. The aisle was nearly clear when Ethan reached row 8. His seat looked exactly as he had left it. Hoodie imprint on the cushion. Pretzel bag still unopened. A half-empty water bottle trembling in the cup holder with each movement of the aircraft. Ordinary things from a world that no longer existed. The young man who had sat beside him waited near the aisle, phone clutched in one hand, face pale. "Man," he said, voice breaking. "I thought you were just some guy." Ethan paused. The young man looked ashamed before Ethan could answer. I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," Ethan said. The young man swallowed. Ethan was not cruel. His voice stayed even. That somehow made it worse. "But you're still alive," Ethan said. "So maybe remember it." The young man nodded slowly, eyes lowered. Near the forward door, the mother from row 12 turned back. Caleb was already outside with a rescue worker, wrapped in a silver emergency blanket. She had rain in her hair and tears on her face. "You," she said when she saw Ethan. She stepped toward him, then stopped, as if unsure whether she was allowed to touch the person who had just pulled her child back from death. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan thought of Lily so sharply it hurt. He nodded once. "Go to your son." She obeyed, stumbling into the rain. Claire stood by the slide, soaked from spray blowing through the open door. Her uniform clung to her shoulders. Her voice was hoarse, but she was still counting, still directing, still holding the broken night together by force of will. When Ethan reached her, She blocked him with one arm. "You next. Crew first?" "Not tonight," she said. He looked at her. Claire's eyes flashed. "You helped bring them down. Now get off this plane while I still have the authority to order you." For the first time since the emergency began, something almost like a smile touched Ethan's face. "Yes, ma'am." He crossed his arms, sat at the edge, and pushed himself into the storm. The slide threw him into cold rain and flashing light. His shoes hit wet pavement. A firefighter caught his elbow. "Keep moving, sir." Ethan moved away from the aircraft, each step heavy, as if gravity had doubled now that the sky no longer held him. Behind him, Atlantic World. 482 loomed in the rain, wounded but whole. Ahead, survivors huddled beneath emergency lights, wrapped in silver blankets, crying into phones, holding each other, staring at the man who had walked out of row 8 and returned them to Earth. Ethan's phone buzzed once. Signal. His breath caught. He looked down at the screen. Mrs. Helen Parker calling. For the first time all night, his hands truly shook. Mrs. Helen. Parker's name glowed on Ethan Brooks's phone like a small porch light in the middle of a storm. For a second, he could not answer. Rain ran down his face. Emergency lights flashed against the wet runway. Around him, passengers shook beneath silver blankets, calling husbands, wives, daughters, sons, saying the same broken sentence in different voices. "I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive." But Ethan only heard the phone buzzing in his hand. Lily was on the other side of that call. Not directly, maybe. She was probably still asleep in her room in Seattle, one cheek pressed into her pillow, unaware that the world had almost taken her father, and then given him back. But Helen Parker would know something was wrong. She was too old, too sharp, too much like a second mother to miss the hour, the delay, the trembling in his voice when he answered. Ethan wiped rain from the screen and pressed accept. "Helen." "Ethan Brooks." Her voice came through tight and breathless. "Tell me you are not on that flight they are talking about." He closed his eyes. Behind him, a paramedic shouted for more blankets. Somewhere to his left, a woman sobbed into a video call. A firefighter's radio crackled with static and runway codes. The world was loud with survival. "Helen," he said softly, "is Lily asleep?" There was a pause. That pause was judgment. Fear. Love. "She's asleep," Helen said. "Now answer me." Ethan looked back at the aircraft. Its nose was pointed into the rain, emergency crews clustered beneath it, the cockpit windows glowing faintly. It looked impossible that something so large had nearly become a grave. I was on it. Helen inhaled sharply. "Lord have mercy, I'm okay. Do not say that like you misplaced your keys. The news is saying emergency landing. Smoke. Fire trucks. People screaming online. Ethan, what happened?" He could have told her about the hydraulics, about Ryan's shaking hands, about Captain Reynolds trapped in his own body, about the runway lights sliding in and out of rain like the last thin thread between life and death. But all he said was, "The plane had trouble. We landed." Helen was silent again. Then her voice changed, lower now, no longer frightened first, but understanding. "You helped, didn't you?" Ethan opened his mouth. No answer came. Helen had known him before the software job, before the quiet house in Seattle, before the careful routine of school lunches and bedtime stories. She had been there the night he returned from his final deployment. She had seen him sit in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside because he did not know how to enter a peaceful home while still carrying war in his bones. "You helped," she repeated. Ethan's throat tightened. "I had to." "No," Helen said gently. "You chose to." The words struck deeper than they should have. Across the runway, Claire Bennett was helping Walter into a medical transport van. The older man reached for her hand before climbing in, lips moving in thanks. Claire squeezed his fingers, then turned away quickly, as if she could not afford tears until every passenger was accounted for. Frank Miller stood nearby, wrapped in a blanket he clearly did not want, giving a statement to an airport officer. He kept glancing toward Ethan, like a man making sure a witness to history did not vanish. Ryan Cooper appeared at the bottom of the mobile stairs, soaked through, his pilot shirt clinging to his shoulders. He watched paramedics carry Captain Reynolds toward an ambulance. When the stretcher passed, Ryan stood straighter, not because anyone ordered him to, because some part of command had finally settled into him. Ethan saw all of it, each face, each survival. Then Helen's voice came again. "Lily asked about you before bed." Ethan stopped breathing. "What did she say?" "She asked if your plane would fly over the ocean." He pressed his free hand against his eyes. "I told her yes," Helen said. "Then she asked if you were scared of the dark." A broken laugh escaped him. It hurt coming out. "What did you say?" "I said her daddy was brave." Ethan looked down at the wet pavement. "You shouldn't have told her that." "Why not?" "Because brave men still leave." Helen's voice sharpened with the authority of a woman who had raised children, buried friends, and tolerated no foolishness from wounded men, pretending guilt was wisdom. Brave men come back when they can, and when they cannot, it is not because they loved less. Ethan had no defense against that. For years he had believed leaving the Air Force had made him a better father. Maybe it had. But tonight had shown him something he did not want to face. The part of him that flew into danger had not been the enemy of the father. It had been part of the same man. The man who promised to come home. The man who stood up when coming home required courage. Helen's voice softened. "Do you want me to wake her?" "No." The answer came fast. Too fast. He pictured Lily sitting up in the dark, scared by adult voices, trying to understand words like emergency landing and almost. "Let her sleep. She'll want to hear your voice. She can hear it in the morning." "Ethan." He knew that tone. "What?" "You are not protecting her by carrying this alone." The rain fell harder. It tapped against the silver blankets, the ambulances, the scorched runway, the phone in his hand. Ethan turned slightly away from the others. "I don't know how to tell her I almost didn't come back." Helen exhaled slowly. "Then start with the part where you did." Ethan closed his eyes. For 1 second, he imagined the morning. Lily padding into the kitchen in mismatched socks. Helen handing her the phone. Lily's sleepy voice saying, "Daddy?" And him answering from an airport in Ireland, half a world away, alive because a frightened crew had asked for help, and a man who had sworn off the sky had stood up anyway. A vehicle pulled up beside the survivors. An airport official stepped out, raincoat whipping in the wind. "Mr. Brooks," he called. "Ethan Brooks?" Ethan turned. Every nearby face turned with him. The official looked unsettled, almost reverent. "We need you inside for a statement. The aviation authority is waiting. And, sir, the passengers are asking if they can see you." Ethan glanced at Frank, at Claire, at Ryan, at the survivors wrapped in silver, staring not like spectators now, but like people whose lives had become tied to his. Helen heard the silence. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan swallowed. "They know my name." Helen gave a soft, sad laugh. "Of course they do. I didn't want that." "I know. I just wanted to get home." Her voice warmed, steady as a kitchen light left on after midnight. "Then do what you always do, Ethan. Finish what needs finishing. Then come home." He looked back at the wounded aircraft, then at the people alive beneath the rain. His voice dropped. "I will." And for the first time all night, the promise did not feel like a chain. It felt like a destination. Inside the emergency reception hall at Shannon Airport, the survivors looked older than they had on the plane. Not by years, by truth. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The coffee was too weak. The blankets around their shoulders made wealthy executives, honeymooning couples, college students, grandparents, and tired parents look the same. Fragile, damp, human. Stripped of all the little costumes people wore to prove they were separate from one another. Ethan Brooks stood near the far wall, still in his wet hoodie, watching paramedics move between rows of chairs. A woman held an oxygen mask to her face with one hand and her husband's wrist with the other. Walter sat with his bad back braced by pillows, staring at nothing. Caleb slept against his mother's side, the plastic dinosaur still trapped in his fist. No one was laughing. No one was complaining about missed connections. The world had become very simple. Breath was wealth. Aviation officers had already taken Ethan's first statement. They asked clean questions in careful voices. What did he observe when he entered the cockpit? What instructions did he give First Officer Cooper? At what point did he assess that Shannon was the safest option? Did he touch the controls? Ethan answered only what he knew. Ryan flew the airplane. The phrase came out again and again, almost stubbornly, not because Ethan wanted to erase himself, but because he knew what fear could do to a young pilot's future. Ryan had been terrified. Ryan had also stayed in the seat. Both things were true. Ethan would not let the world remember only one. Across the room, Ryan sat alone, with a paper cup of coffee untouched between his hands. His airline jacket had been replaced by an emergency blanket, but he still sat like someone wearing a uniform. Back straight, eyes hollow, a man replaying every second and punishing himself for every imperfect move. Ethan walked over. Ryan looked up. "They're going to say I couldn't handle it. They're going to say a lot of things. That doesn't help." "No." Ryan gave a tired, bitter smile. "You always this direct?" "When I'm tired. You were tired before this started." Ethan sat beside him. For a moment, neither man spoke. On the far side of the hall, Claire Bennett was giving her own statement, hands folded in front of her, chin lifted. Every so often, her voice broke, but she kept going. A woman built from duty, cracked by conscience, still standing. Ryan stared into his coffee. When the captain went down, I froze for a second. I saw. I keep thinking about that second. Don't worship it. Ryan turned. What? That second wasn't the landing. It wasn't the runway. It wasn't the passengers walking out alive. Don't make 1 second bigger than all the ones you survived after it. Ryan's eyes reddened. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You think courage is never freezing? It isn't. Courage is what happens after. Ryan looked away quickly, jaw working. Aviation officials entered again, this time with 2 airline representatives in dark suits. Their faces carried the stiff seriousness of people already measuring lawsuits, headlines, insurance, blame. One of them scanned the room and found Ethan immediately. That annoyed him. Not because they were looking at him. Because they were looking at him like a headline. Mr. Brooks, one said, approaching with a careful smile. My name is Daniel Price. I'm with Atlantic World's Crisis Response Team. First, on behalf of the company, I want to express our profound gratitude. Ethan stood slowly. How's Captain Reynolds? Daniel blinked, thrown off script. He's being evaluated. Early reports are hopeful. And the passengers? We're arranging hotels, medical support, rebooking. Good. Daniel adjusted his tone. We would also like to coordinate any public communication with you. Naturally, there is already significant media attention. Several passengers posted from the runway. Your name is circulating. We want to make sure the story is told accurately. Ethan studied him. Accurately. It was a word powerful people used when they meant safely. Before Ethan could answer, Frank Miller stepped into the conversation, blanket slung over one shoulder like he resented it. Accurate would be saying your crew nearly had no one until he stood up. Daniel's smile tightened. Sir, we're still gathering facts. Frank's eyes narrowed. I gave you one. Claire heard the exchange and crossed the room. Her hair had fully fallen from its bun now, streaking damp against her face. She looked exhausted, but when she stood beside Ethan, her voice was clear. He saved us time, she said. First Officer Cooper flew under impossible conditions. Dr. Carter kept the captain alive. Frank helped keep the cabin together. But Mr. Brooks gave us a chance we did not have. The room quieted. Passengers turned. Ryan stood in the background, stunned by the public grace of it. Daniel Price looked suddenly aware that this was no longer a controllable hallway conversation. Too many witnesses, too many phones, too much truth. The young man who had sat beside Ethan stepped forward from a cluster of passengers. His name was Tyler, Ethan had learned later. 26, software sales, loud headphones, frightened eyes. I recorded some of it, Tyler said. Not the cockpit. Before. When everyone doubted him. His voice shook. I thought he was just some guy. I was wrong. The mother of Caleb rose next. My son is alive because he stood up. Walter lifted a trembling hand. So am I. One by one, heads turned toward Ethan. Gratitude filled the room, but it did not feel soft. It felt heavy, almost accusing. As if every person there had been forced to face how quickly they had measured another human being and found him ordinary until ordinary saved them. Ethan felt trapped under it. He had wanted silence, a phone call, a flight home, Lily's arms around his neck. Instead, he had become a mirror. Frank seemed to understand. He moved closer and lowered his voice. Don't run from it too fast. Ethan kept his eyes on the floor. I'm not a hero. Frank's reply came quietly. Most real ones hate the word. The doors opened at the end of the hall, and Dr. Allison Carter stepped in, her sweater still stained at the sleeves. Everyone looked at her. She smiled faintly through exhaustion. "Captain Reynolds is stable." A sound rose from the room. Not applause. Not exactly. A release. A collective breath that had been trapped since 37,000 feet over the Atlantic. Ryan covered his face with one hand. Claire turned away, shoulders shaking once. Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time, the night allowed a little mercy. Then his phone buzzed again. A text from Helen. "Lily is awake. She knows there was a problem. She wants her dad." Ethan stared at the words until they blurred. The room around him faded. The officials, the survivors, the questions, the praise. All of it became distant. He typed with wet fingers. "Tell her I'm coming home." Then he stopped, deleted it, typed again. "Tell her I'm safe. And tell her I kept my promise." He hit send. Outside the windows, dawn began to pale over Ireland, soft and grey over the runway, where the wounded aircraft still waited under emergency lights. The world would call Ethan Brooks many things by sunrise. Hero, veteran, mystery passenger, savior in seat 8A. But as he stood in that room, surrounded by the people who had survived because he refused to stay seated, Ethan knew the only title that mattered was the one waiting for him across an ocean. Dad. By sunrise, the story had already outrun Ethan Brooks. It crossed the Atlantic before he did. It moved through passenger videos, trembling voice notes, airport footage, and blurry photos taken through rain-streaked windows. A man in a grey hoodie, a former fighter pilot, a father in seat 8A. The stranger who walked into a failing cockpit and helped bring 195 people back to Earth, but Ethan did not watch any of it. He sat alone near a quiet gate at Shannon Airport, with a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hands. His hoodie had dried stiff against his shoulders. His eyes burned from exhaustion. Around him, airline staff moved carefully, speaking in lowered voices, as if the airport itself had learned respect overnight. Across the terminal, Claire Bennett stood with the remaining cabin crew. She had given 3 statements, spoken to emergency officials, checked passenger lists twice, and still looked toward Ethan every few minutes. Not because she doubted him now, because she was trying to understand how close she had come to missing him. A man could sit 3 rows away from salvation, she thought, and the world could still dismiss him because he did not look like the answer. That thought would stay with her longer than the landing. Ryan Cooper approached Ethan slowly, carrying 2 fresh coffees. His uniform was wrinkled. His hair was still damp. He looked older than 31 now, but steadier too. "Figured yours was dead," Ryan said. Ethan took the cup. "Thanks." Ryan sat beside him. For a while they watched ground crews move outside the window. Beyond the glass, Atlantic World 482 stood beneath the grey Irish morning, wounded, silent, surrounded by maintenance vehicles and investigators. Ryan nodded toward it. "I keep seeing the bounce." Ethan looked at him. "You'll see it for a while. That's supposed to comfort me?" "No." Ryan almost smiled. Ethan took a slow drink of coffee. It tasted burnt and perfect. "You'll also remember the stop," Ethan said. "Do not forget that part." Ryan's throat moved. The stop. The part where everyone lived. Ryan looked down at his hands. "I don't know how to carry that. You carry it one day at a time. And when it gets too heavy, you talk to someone before it turns into something mean inside you. Ryan absorbed that. He knew, without asking, that Ethan was not only talking about aviation. A boarding announcement echoed softly through the terminal. Not theirs. Another flight. Another group of passengers walking toward the sky with coffee cups, backpacks, neck pillows, ordinary complaints. Life continuing with cruel and beautiful confidence. Ethan's phone lit up. Video call from Helen Parker. His hand tightened around it. Ryan noticed and stood immediately. "I'll give you space." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. He answered. Helen's face appeared first, lined with worry and relief. Behind her was Ethan's kitchen in Seattle, morning light slipping through the blinds. Then the camera shifted too quickly, and Lily Brooks filled the screen. Her hair was messy from sleep. One braid had come loose. Her pajama shirt had a faded moon on the front. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying, but was trying very hard to pretend she had not. "Daddy?" That one word broke through every wall Ethan had left. "Hey, baby. You were on the scary plane." He closed his eyes for half a second. "Yes." "Mrs. Parker said you're safe." "I am." "Are you hurt?" "No, sweetheart. Just tired." Lily leaned closer to the screen, studying his face the way children do when they are looking for the truth adults try to hide. "Did you fly the plane?" Ethan looked past the phone for a moment. At Ryan standing near the window. At Claire watching from across the terminal. At Frank Miller speaking quietly with an officer. At survivors sitting under blankets, alive and changed. "I helped," Ethan said. Lily nodded slowly, accepting that in the simple, sacred way, children accept miracles when they come from someone they love. "Did you get scared?" Ethan felt the answer rise. The honest one. The only one that would honor her. "Yes." Her face changed. Not disappointed. Relieved. "But you still came home?" His voice almost failed. "I'm coming home now." Lily pressed her little hand against the screen. Ethan lifted his own hand and matched it, palm to glass. Father and daughter separated by an ocean, but held together by a promise that had survived fire, fear, and falling steel. "I told you," he whispered. "I promised." Helen turned away in the background, wiping her face with the corner of her sleeve. Later, when Ethan finally boarded the flight that would take him back to the United States, no one asked whether he belonged in his seat. No one looked at his hoodie and built a smaller story around him. The gate agent said his name softly. The crew greeted him with a silence deeper than applause. Passengers recognized him and did not rush him. They simply stood aside. For once, the world made room. Ethan took his seat by the window and looked out at the pale morning sky. He had spent years believing the pilot he used to be, and the father he wanted to be, could not live inside the same man. But somewhere over the Atlantic, in the dark between terror and duty, he had learned the truth. Courage was not the opposite of fear. Courage was love under pressure. It was a mother lying to her child so he could keep breathing. It was a young first officer refusing to let go. It was a flight attendant admitting the cost of her own assumptions. It was an old soldier standing up in an aisle. It was a tired father breaking his silence because strangers needed him, and because one little girl at home still believed he would return. When the plane lifted from Ireland, Ethan closed his eyes. This time, He did not dream of alarms or pho or falling. He dreamed of a front door opening in Seattle, small feet running across hardwood, Lily's arms around his neck, her voice against his shoulder. "Daddy, you came home." And in that dream, as in life, Ethan held her tight and answered the only way a promise can be answered. "I did." Stories like Ethan's remind us that ordinary people often carry extraordinary histories, and that judgment can blind us to the very person who might save us. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and comment with 3 words in English. Never judge anyone.